Welcome to the third episode of the series Decolonizing the Mind, the Final Frontier of Colonialism. I got some positive feedback from the last series, and I want to share that with you. I really enjoy the feedback, learn from it. From my South African friends who taught me and educated me in Ubuntu philosophy, they use the phrase, "In teaching you, I'm educating myself." Uh, so, uh, by giving me this critical feedback, I myself grow in developing the narrative. So, a friend of mine noted that I uses the terminology Israeli Defense Force (IDF), and he correctly pointed out we should call it Israeli Occupation Force (IOF). And in the book, I explain in one paragraph how terminology is used in constructing lies, and we should be careful about it, and we could think of it ourselves, or other people could teach us about it. Another question I got was the sources. What are the sources that I use? Now, I don't use basically Western sources only. Obviously, I follow the Western sources, but I look at the websites of the main player, the USA and UK government, the Israel websites of the Israeli opinion makers, website of Iran, Russia, China, Hamas, Hezbollah. I follow these websites, and if they are in Arabic, I use Google Translate to study them. Then I follow other analysts who are analyzing the situation in the Middle East. Notably, Colonel McGregor from the USA, Scott Ritter, these are military experts. I don't agree with their analysis on many points, but on other points, I found it very valuable. There are other analysts, by the way, which I look into. I have a digital library of thousands of PDF which I've collected in the course of 12 years, which are freely available from the internet. And I have a database of notes. And for each episode, I keep notes, I keep track of the sources. So that's why if you ask me for the source, I would be able to point it very exactly. Now, I'm going to deal with the Israeli response to October 7th, the immediate response of the population, the immediate response of the leadership, and the long-term response of the leadership. Now, the immediate response of the population, was panic. But it didn't happen in the history of the Zionist state that in one attack, more than 1,000 Israelis were killed, military and civilians, where the fence didn't protect the Israelis from attack from Gaza, the disbelief that this could happen, the feeling of total insecurity, the focus on the survival of the family, and that is in the south. Now, as the things are getting worse in the north, at the border of Lebanon, we see, excuse me, we see villagers leaving their villages in Israel. So they are so afraid now to live near the border where Hezbollah can fire rockets and is firing rockets, that they just leave. And this is telling for the future what will happen if Muslim forces invade Israel. Will the Zionists and the population and the military, will they stay for a fight? Or will they take the plane and leave and go for Europe or the United States? Now, the other effect of the attack of October 7 is the complete radicalization of the population in Palestine, in occupied Palestine. Most Israeli want revenge, and not just revenge, they want total revenge. So they are, although they have lost trust in their leadership, Netanyahu has 3 cases of corruption against him. There were large demonstrations against him. Yet they want an end to their insecurity for the long term. And therefore, they live sometimes in a world of fantasy. Here's a guy, a founder of Memory, one of the sites that I follow, that's a Middle East Media Research Institute, is set up by somebody from the intelligence corps of the Israeli Defense Forces, still here, but is the Israeli occupation force, which he joined in 1968, and basically set up a site to collect material by following all the groups that are against Israel. Interesting site to see the Israeli perspective. And in an interview, he evaluated October 7, and he just, as a realist, proposed to exchange the hostages for all the Palestinian prisoners. And the interviewer said, "You say that Israel should release those prisoners, Palestinian prisoners, in exchange for the hostages held in Gaza." And then Carmon says, "In exchange for all the people who were kidnapped, all the wounded hostages, all the raped women, everybody held by them," he called that the women raped, there was no evidence of it, "we'll take them back and they can take all there." And the interviewer then concluded, "But this might be seen by the world as a defeat of the IDF, which is IOF, and Israel." And Cameron then replies, "The defeat already happened. We can't tell ourselves anything else. Even if we exact revenge from them, and I'm sure we will, the defeat will not go away. It is here to stay. What is left for us to do is to save the poor people held by them, so we can tell their families that we have offered everything, that there was nothing else for us to offer." So you see that they are realists in Israel, but they are not in power because the leaders force to apply to the sentiments of a radical solution from the population, and by themselves, they fought to wipe Hamas off the earth. When Netanyahu finally approved for a ground operation, he says, "This war is an existential test for Israel. It is our second war of independence." These two concepts, existential threats and the second war of independence, sorry, you will hear that in the past weeks, and definitely in the coming months. So if this war is an existential war, how is your long-term strategy? Now, regarding Hamas, it is just genocide, relentless bombing of Gaza, and killing as much people as possible, preparing the ground of the way for a ground war, and that's important, drawing the US into the war. Now there's daily telephone conversation between the ministers of defense of the USA and of Israel to talk about strategy, tactics, what they need. There are advisors from the US Army on the ground, especially those who have fought in Iraq, to share their lessons and maybe even fight in combat. So the US has promised to send 2 aircraft carriers, and so there is a good prospect for the Israelis to draw the US into a larger regional war that might be coming. And obviously, they try to get international support for the destruction of Hamas. Now, there's an interesting directive called the Hannibal Directive, named after Hannibal, a general of the Carthaginian army in Tunisia, now what is now Tunisia, who fought against the Roman Empire, and he preferred suicide by poison rather than being taken prisoner by his Roman enemies. Now, the Israeli army has ordered a directive called the Hannibal directive, and this order allows commanders to take whatever action is necessary, including endangering the life of an abducted soldier, to foil the abduction. However, it doesn't allow for a soldier to be killed in order to prevent his abduction, according to the IDF, so the IOF's Chief of Staff, Benny Grants. So what does it say? It says here, where in former times the policy of the army was not to endanger the life of their soldiers in the case of a kidnapping, and in this case, in the case of the kidnapping also of civilians, now this order says you might endanger their life. And although it says here, but you shouldn't kill them, in practice it means even should to kill your own soldiers or civilian in order to prevent abduction. And they have done that. They have done that. There are reports of it in the press during the October 7th attacks of Hamas. So this is a change of policy which is radical and tells you about the mindset there. And now here is an interesting development. There's a think tank, an Israeli think tank with ties to Netanyahu. And 10 days after the attacks of October 7, they issued a report. And then in that report, they said, well, this war is a unique and rare opportunity for the relocation and final settlement of the entire Gaza population, meaning a population of 2 million people. So what do they mean? They mean if we now get rid of the whole population of Gaza, then we are forming this greater Israel idea where we incorporate Gaza, we have cleaned it from its population, we have erased Hamas from the face of the earth. And how do we do that? So in the plan that they propose, it would go as follows. In northern Egypt, in the Sinai Peninsula, they would offer three things. One was the creation of 10 cities southwest of the Gaza Strip, the construction of a humanitarian corridor to assist, so-called assist the residents, and finally the building of cities in northern Sinai. So in parallel, you will have a sterile zone, several kilometers wide, would be established within Egypt, south of the Israeli border, so that the evacuated residents would not be able to return. So what this report is saying this, look, we're going to drive the Palestinians out of Gaza into Egypt. We set up tents there for them to live, and at the end we could help them build cities, maybe with the help of the Arab billionaires. And obviously they think that Egypt will cooperate with this plan. So we clean up Gaza. And if in this process of relocating 2 million people, you kill 100,000, that's not a big problem. That is a chance they have seen and a long-term strategy. Then we have seen another thing, the policy of bragging now. Immediately after October 7, Netanyahu said, we will invade Gaza and we will take control of Gaza. And he was saying day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, in 3 weeks' time, they have assembled tens of thousands of forces, and they just didn't dare enter Gaza. Because Hamas has said, we are waiting for you. We are waiting for you. And in fact, they did a preparation last Saturday where a small group invaded Gaza and they were repelled by Hamas. It's not widely reported in the Western press, but it's widely described in the Arab press. And then the other bragging. So the invasion of Gaza is not an easy thing, it will be a bloody thing. And then they brag about flooding the tunnels with chemical weapons, which is forbidden. Use of chemical weapon is forbidden, uh, and uh, and they would use nerve gas. And one of the sources explaining is that the U.S. would oversee this operation. The U.S. Delta Force will oversee large quantities of nerve gas being pumped into the tunnels, capable of paralyzing the bodily movement for a period between 6 and 12 hours. I say this is bragging because you were talking about 300 kilometers of tunnels. Well, let's see how this operation goes. It is just bragging, like Macron did. Macron said, after a visit to Netanyahu, we will set up an international force to fight Hamas. Nobody reported to Macron for joining him. And then you have the policy of the nuclear threat, because the most important force behind the resistance, behind Hamas and all the other forces, in the eyes of the Israelis, is Iran, which is, by the way, not entirely the case. There are many other forces supporting the resistance in Palestine. But the Israelis see Hamas as Iran as the main force. So Netanyahu has issued nuclear threat to Iran. And it is presented as a slip of the tongue, but that threat has been over there in the press the last few years. And mind you, if you look at the total arsenal of nuclear weapons in the world, which is about, total infantry of 13,000, with Russia having the most, more than 6,000, and United States with 5,500. Then you get China with 350, France and the UK with a couple of hundreds, India with about 150, Pakistan even more, about 165, and Israel has 90 nuclear heads. And Israel is threatening Iran, we're going to come after you with our nuclear arms. So it is important to know how will Iran react to this and how is Iran reacting to it. In order to understand that, the role of Iran, you have to understand the history of Iran, the Iranian revolution, the role of Iran in the liberation struggle of Palestine, and the role of Iran in the anti-imperialist struggle. And that is a theme for the next episode. So as always, I refer to the source of what I'm telling you now, which is the source for the last two episodes, but now I added the paragraph 5.1, 5.4 on the construction of lies. You could download the PDF at sanduhir.com, and you could subscribe to this channel and share the video with your friends, family, colleagues, and encourage them to subscribe. Get involved in discussion groups, make a donation, and go to sandohir.com to see how you can do it. So thank you very much for listening to this episode, and see you to the next episode.